Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to begin by welcoming those members of the public and press in attendance and those who are watching the live stream of this meeting via YouTube. Minutes of the meeting will be produced in the usual way, and a recording of the meeting will be available to view on YouTube until such time that the minutes are produced. Please be aware that the audio from the microphones will be captured on the live stream. Therefore, those invited to speak need to ensure their microphones are on when speaking and are as close to the member as possible. To enable the meeting to run in an orderly manner, can all present keep their microphones off except when invited to speak. Please ensure that the microphone is turned off when you have finished speaking. I would also like to remind members to make sure their mobile phones are on silent or turned off for the duration of the meeting. Please be aware that the cameras will be on at all times during the meeting. Agenda item 1, apologies for absence. Thank you. Member Services, can you please report any apologies?
Apologies received, Chairman, from Councillors Booth and Councillor Harris. Councillor John Clark is in attendance today as a substitute member for Councillor Booth. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Agenda item 2 is to confirm and sign the minutes of the previous meeting held on the 24th July 2023. Do I have a proposer to approve these minutes of the 24th July? Councillor Christie, thank you. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Mockett, thank you. Does any member have any comments or amendments to make on these minutes? No. Can I have a show of hands to approve the minutes of the meeting on the 24th July? Thank you, members. The minutes of the 24th July 2024 are therefore agreed. Agenda item 3 is to report additional items for consideration which the chairman deems urgent by virtue of special circumstances now to be specified. I believe there are none. Agenda item 4 is to receive any declarations of interest under the local code of conduct in respect of any items to be discussed at this meeting. If you have anything to declare, please can you raise your hand? So nobody has any declarations. Okay, thank you. Agenda item 5 is the audit results report for 21-22. I now call upon external auditor Mark who's joined us virtually today to introduce the report.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just check you can hear me before I go into my 5 pages of dialogue with you? Excellent. Okay, so apologies, I can't be with you today. Today's one of those days where I've got to be in 3 places at once, so slightly tricky, but really good to be with you to present our full audit results report, which is in your pack, and indeed have the ability to close the audit and sign the audit opinion tomorrow. So I'm going to focus on the key assurances that our report and our audit provides to you as a committee today in relation to your 2021-22 financial statements and then your role in approving them as a committee. So I'll pull out 5 or 6 key points to get across, and then we can take questions at the end, but take the report as read generally. So those key points will start with our materiality level, which is on page 5 of our report. So we're working to a materiality level of £1.3 million. So anything that would be an audit difference above that would give us cause for issue if it wasn't corrected. But we are reporting all audit differences above £65,000 today, so you can get a sense of how thorough the audit was and therefore what assurances we can get from the procedures that we have performed. In terms of status of the audit, which is a bit lower on page 5, there was one outstanding procedure at the date we issued the report in relation to grant income restatement. That's all complete, and there are no new issues to bring to your attention as a result of just completing and closing out that area of work. And then we just have the remaining closing procedures to do after you've concluded your meeting today, and then tomorrow morning when we receive your signed financial statements and letter of representation. So as I say, in a really good place. Next section I'd go to is our audit differences on our page 7, because this will provide you with key assurance as a committee. And I think this is where the good news story really starts. So there are no uncorrected audit differences to bring to your attention. And there is only one corrected difference to note, which is in relation to the pension liability that sits on your balance sheet. And that audit difference is driven wholly by a timing issue. So a timing issue of the data that Mark and the finance team had available when the draft statements were prepared from the actuary, and then the results of the pension fund audit, which amended some of the pension funds investment asset valuations, which in turn reduced your own liability. And then because of the timing of the audit, there was a subsequent update because the pension fund's triennial review was published on the 31st of March this year, and the assumptions used within that 3-year triennial model did have an impact on the balance sheet date at the 31st of March 2022. Together, they would reduce your council's pension fund liability by £7.2 million. So I think the bit to take away is there is nothing that you could have done in your draft financial statements to get that correct. And they are only movements as a result of information that has come to our attention during the audit. The only other area we have are a couple of disclosure differences as noted on page 7 there for you. So given what I've said about the timing difference on the pension liability and the fact there was only one corrected difference and no uncorrected differences, I think you as a committee can take significant assurance that your closed down arrangements that led to the draft financial statements were really robust. And despite all the audit procedures we could kind of throw at you, there's only one difference as a result of timing that could come out of it. So a really pleasing result from our perspective. So I would clearly hold on to that. And then page 8 takes you through all the risks that we had from an audit perspective in our audit plan, the procedures that we've undertaken, and therefore the assurances that we've got against each and every one of those. And as you can see, just by scanning down, the pension liability risk was the only one where we had something to report. So again, really good assurance across all the areas of audit risk that we had. That will then mean that we have performed all the procedures and we only need to get standard assurances through our letter of representation, which is a closing procedure. So we haven't added in any specific need for representations into that letter. It's just a standard one that we would issue for any audit. So again, as a committee, that means that all the working papers supporting those draft financial statements and all the discussions with Peter, Mark and the finance team have given us all that we need. So again, really strong assurance for you as a committee. And then if we add all that up together, that would lead us to be able to issue an unqualified audit opinion on your financial statements once you've done your due process this afternoon. And section 3 of our report sets out what a proposed audit opinion wording would be. Then if I can turn to section 5 of our report on value for money, which is the other aspect of our work. So our procedures didn't identify any risks of significant weakness in the council's arrangements. That would mean that we didn't have to perform any further audit procedures. And that again means we have no matters to report by exception within our audit opinion. And there is a section within that in section 3 that sets that out. So again, you can't get a better outcome than that from the audit procedures over value for money. We will be issuing a commentary on your arrangements as part of our auditor's annual report, which we'll probably issue next week, but it has to come out after we've finished our audit opinion and work. So is clearly on timeline for that. So just to conclude, really good, really clean audit, not much to report to you, but I wouldn't take that I'd take that in the spirit that it means the audit has gone well as opposed to anything else. And I think that is, as I say, down to the strength of the closed down procedure and the robust draft financial statements that were put forward for audit. So thank you to Peter and Mark for their help over the course, and then latterly Sian in helping close out a few other areas recently. But happy to take questions on any of the detail, but hopefully that's provided you with a lot of assurance for you to consider the accounts, which is your next item, and then through your approval processes.
Thank you, Mark. May I have a proposer for the report, please? Councillor Tierney, thank you. Could I have a seconder? Councillor Christie, thank you. I now open the item for discussion. Please raise your hand if you have any comments. No comments. There are no speakers. Therefore, the recommendation is for the Audit and Risk Management Committee to note the content of the report. Please raise your hand if you agree. Thank you, members. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
You are welcome to leave the meeting if you wish, or you can stay.
Oh, thank you. I'll stay to make sure you approve the accounts so I can do my work tomorrow.
Entirely up to you.
Well, I do have to. I've got another call at 5, so I'll stay until 5. But thank you for the offer.
Agenda item 6 is the statement of accounts for 21-22. I now call upon Mark Saunders, Chief Accountant, to introduce the report.
Thank you, Chairman. Just before I start, I'd just like to say thank you to Mark and Jacob and Claire for all the work that's gone on in the last year and a bit to try and get these accounts finalised. Been an extremely challenging year for obviously both yourselves and us, and to get to this position is really pleasing. So we're really grateful for all the time and effort that you and your team have put in. It has been it's been a bit of a struggle sometimes to try and get everything done in appropriate time, but we got there eventually, and so thank you to you all for that. So following on from Mark's report on the audit results, which obviously we're very pleased with the outcome of that. The next stage of the process is for committee to formally approve the final statement of accounts. These are the accounts which essentially were presented as a draft back last October to committee, and as we've just seen from the audit results report, the main change to those accounts has been to do with the pension liability, which, as Mark said, is nothing that we could have specifically done at that time to do anything about. This has all subsequently come out through various issues and timings of the reports. So, and as we said, there were no uncorrected audit differences, which is really pleasing. And an important thing to note is that none of the corrected adjustments in relation to the pension liabilities or any other sort of disclosure changes that we've had to do has resulted in any change to the council's general fund balance or usable reserves in the year. So they've stayed exactly as they were back last October when it was published, draft was published. So the statement of accounts does actually require approval by this committee following the audit results report we've just received. It's an important part of the process, and as such, on tomorrow, which is when the date of the audit opinion is likely to be signed, we will need the appropriate signatures on the statement of accounts, which are several places where Peter has to sign as Section 151 officer, and there is one place where Councillor French has to sign as chairman, just to state that they have been formally approved by this committee, and to make that declaration. So that will be done tomorrow and sent to Mark and his team to formally get their sign off on the 27th, tomorrow. And then following the receipt of the auditor's opinion on the accounts, this will then be incorporated into the statement of accounts and published on our website, and we will give the appropriate notice that the audit has been concluded, which is a great relief to us all. And we move on to the following year, which is obviously 22-23. And for those ones, the draft statements will be presented to this committee in November, at November's meeting, where we'll do the usual annual run through the training, and then some Councillor Tierney tries to fall asleep while we go through that again. We'll be seeing if we can get a few more new jokes in the into the pack, just to liven it up a bit. So that will be the draft 22-23 accounts will be looked at at next committee. Obviously, the committee doesn't need to formally approve those at this moment in time, because that will happen after the 22-23 accounts have been actually audited. For which at the moment we don't have a specific timeline, but obviously when the auditors are in a position to let us know what that timescale is, and obviously we'll be working towards that in due course. So that's all I think I need to say, Chairman, in terms of the statements. I don't intend to go through 135 pages of the statements, as this committee has already seen them. I know we've got a few new members, but essentially 21-22 accounts have been concluded, and we just need to formally approve those and then move on to the next year. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mark. Could I have a proposer for the report, please? Councillor Tierney, thank you. Can I have a seconder? Councillor Moppet, thank you. I now open the item for discussion. Please raise your hand if you have any comments. Councillor Tierney.
Survived that very well. Thank you. So I think that's a good situation. And as was jokingly said, it can sometimes be that accounts are a bit boring, but an accountant once said to me that you don't want interesting accounts. The very last thing you want is for your accounts to be exciting. And I think that there are probably councils around the country who would look to this council and say, actually, that's quite a nice position to be in. Sound finances, well managed. It takes a little bit of time, but you can clearly see everything's being done properly. The auditors broadly agree. I think that's just a great situation to be in, and I want to record my thanks to everyone involved. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? No? There are no further speakers, therefore the recommendation is for the Audit and Risk Management Committee to approve the statement of accounts and annual governance statement for the financial year ending 31st of March 22, and that the delegation to be given to the Chairman of Audit and Risk Management Committee and the Corporate Director and Chief of Finance Officer to agree any future amendments to the statement of accounts which may arise prior to the final sign-off by the external auditors. Please raise your hands if you agree to this recommendation. Thank you, members. Agenda item 7 is a letter of representation. Over to you again, please, Mark.
Thank you, Chairman. As Mark said earlier, the letter of representation is a fairly standard document. There's nothing in there which would cause us any concern. As there are no uncorrected audit differences, then there's nothing in this letter which additionally do we need the committee to approve. What it essentially does is just present a lot of representations from this committee to the auditors that everything in relation to the financial affairs of the council for that financial year has been disclosed. That we've given the auditors access to every bit of information in person that they need to conduct their audit, and that there is nothing that we haven't disclosed to them as we've gone along. So there's quite a bit in the letter, but that's just the standard thing that the auditors require. And I hope nobody's got any strong objections, because the auditors won't sign the accounts off until they get this letter of representation. So we hope that the members will agree to that. And just to finally just say that the letter does require signing by the chairman and Peter as the council's chief finance officer. And again, this will be dated on the proposed audit opinion date, which is tomorrow. So all of the signatures relating to the statements and to this letter of representation, the annual government statement, will all be dated the 27th of September, which is the proposed audit opinion date. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mark. Could I have a proposer for the report, please? Councillor Christie, thank you. Can I have a seconder? Councillor Mockett, thank you. I now open the item for discussion. Please raise your hand if you have any comments. There are no speakers, therefore the recommendation is for the Audit and Risk Management Committee to approve the contents and form of the letter of representation to be signed by the chairman of the committee and the council's chief finance officer. Please raise your hands if you agree to the recommendation. Thank you, members. Mark and your team, would you like to leave now, or are you happy to stay till the end?
Happy to go now. Thank you very much for that offer, and thank you for going through due process, and we'll be in
Thank you
contact
very much
tomorrow.
for your time.
No problem. Thank you very much. Thanks.
Bye. Agenda item 7 is the anti-fraud and corruption. Oh, sorry. Did I say 7? Sorry. Oh, it does, isn't it? Agenda item 8 is the anti-fraud and corruption policy. I now call upon David to introduce the report.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, members. Just for those who don't know me, I'm the interim internal audit manager for Fenland. So I was given this task to update the anti-fraud corruption policy. The previous one needed a little bit of updating. It was 2014, 2015. So what we decided to do, rather than track change the previous one, a lot has changed in the obligations for fraud and corruption, and you can see the references in the policy. So what we did, we created a clean one. So it's a bit more detailed. We used Cambridge County Council template for the policy. So it's a bit more extensive, and hopefully you enjoyed the read before this committee. So I'm not going to go in. I mean, it's basically setting out what the council will do whenever, when we see a fraud or anything corruption comes to light, just to reassure this committee that internal audit does look at fraud. It's already inbuilt into our process. So, but we can't find everything, but if something's indicated to us, we have a process here, and this is what has been laid out of how we would conduct the review. But it's also incumbent on all officers and members that should they detect any fraud or any corruption, that they would this is the process to follow. So there are some nice diagrams, and I've tried to keep it fairly simple and explanatory in that. So I don't really want to go into too much detail on this, Chair, if that's okay. So I'm happy to take any questions on this.
Thank you, David. Can I have a proposer for the report, please? Councillor Christie. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Tierney, thank you. I now open this item for discussion. Please raise your hand if you have any comments. Councillor Christie.
Yes, just one very quick question. It's probably either David or Peter. Very thorough document, very good. I did have a good go through it. I just wondered, how is this communicated out to staff and members, and is there any sort of training that goes with it as well?
Thank you, councillor. Yes, once this committee has approved the policy, it's the intention that this will be added to the website, intranet as well as internet, so for transparency. And then we plan to roll it out in a communique to all staff. And I was talking to HR about how we roll this out to everybody in terms of whether we do it training or whether it's manager training, because what will happen is that each service area will have its own specific risk, audit risks for fraud and corruption. So rather than tailor everything from my point of view, they can do it themselves, but we will give some guidance.
Thank you, Jim. Having been on council for quite a long time, I'm aware that there are sections of the public absolutely convinced that there is corruption rife in every council. In all the time I've been on the council, I've never seen anything. But then I'm aware that perhaps I'm a bit naive, and I wondered whether, for the purposes of people who are watching, you could suggest if there are any things people should watch out for, any warning signs that might clue people into there being something could be wrong.
Thank you, councillor. It can, I mean, fraud and corruption can come at all levels. I mean, the fact that we interact with the wider community, there could be kickbacks, for example, or if things are not, if there's no vigilance over the controls process governance, that there could be people that move into sort of sloppy behavior, and it allows things to happen. I mean, I'm sorry, I'm trying to keep it quite general, but I mean, soft commissions, kickbacks for, if you turn a blind eye to this, you get that, you get a discount on retail goods because you're not doing your job properly. So there are all sorts of ways in which, you know, we could breach the council's own rules. So this is trying to tighten up a bit of a process. You know, if it doesn't feel right, or hang on, this is too good to be true, there's probably an indication that there could be some element of fraud or corruption, but it is your own gut sense, and this policy just trying to help you make that decision.
Thank you, David. I was just going to add to that, councillor, that actually this is quite timely because the previous item with the external auditors also giving us a pretty good clean bill of health, because they look for these things as well. So I think that's another assurance that, you know, I take that everything is pretty good.
Any further questions or comments? No? No further speakers, therefore the recommendation is for the Audit and Risk Management Committee to approve the updated anti-fraud and corruption policy. Please raise your hands if you agree to this recommendation. Thank you, members. Agenda item 9 is the annual governance statement 22-23. Pass back over to David to introduce the report.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the annual governance statement 22-23, which covers the period before I was appointed. So I've done my best with the information that I've got, but I've had some good interaction with management team to get the information here. So generally, for the purposes of the committee, that obviously this is a requirement under the Accounting Regulations 2015 that the council conducts its annual review of effectiveness of its system of internal control. So this AGS is basically an assurance over everything. Now, audit does specific part of it in terms of the audit opinion, the audit outturn that was presented at the last committee meeting in July, but it can't cover everything. So this basically covers the whole activity of governance over the council's activities. And you can see in 2.2, the principles of good governance are basically 7 principles: behaving with integrity, demonstrating a strong commitment to ethical values and respecting the rule of law, ensuring openness and comprehensive stakeholder engagement, defining outcomes in terms of sustainable economic, social, and environmental benefits, determining the interventions necessary to achieve the intended outcomes, developing the entity's capacity, so that's basically learning and management and leadership, and then managing risks and performance through robust internal control and strong public financial management, and finally implementing good practices in transparency, reporting and audit to deliver, and that's internal and external, to deliver effective accountability. So I have modified the report a little bit, because previously, and you can see it earlier in the statement of accounts, the format was that the principles themselves and the examples of demonstrating good governance were in portrait. What I've done is I've removed the final column of further improvements, which is now a separate table at the end, and it's now in landscape for those examples. So I think it gives a good representation of the governance that was undertaken by the council to demonstrate all of those principles. So that's the new format. Basically, each principle has got its own explanations. They don't necessarily be the same as the previous years. So there will be some new ones and some modifications. So that's why, again, track changes wasn't particularly possible on this. In terms of the further improvements, you'll see now on page is it 248 or page 14 of 16 of this report, that basically got the further improvements for 21-22 and an update as to whether these are closed or got an extension. But now I've done an identification of the lead officer and the target date by which time these governance improvements will be done. And there are a couple of new ones for 22-23, and they are to basically, for principle A, about reviewing internal policies, which is David Wright is doing, and they'll be completed by the end of the financial year. And ICT is basically arranging for a compliance review of the Cyber Essentials Plus as part of the cybersecurity test. And Stephen Beecher will be doing that by the end of the year. And that just so happens that will be in I'll talk about that in the revised audit plan as well. So thank you, Chair, that's that.
Thank you, David. Could I have a proposer for the report, please? Councillor Mockett, thank you. And a seconder? Councillor Tierney, thank you. I now open the item for discussion. Please raise your hand if you have any comments.
Just so I just want to clear up, because you've just approved the annual governance statement for 21-22 in the statement of accounts. So this 22-23 will eventually end up in the statement of accounts for 22-23. We like to see it as a separate document, because it is a powerful document, and we take it to management team, we take it round, as David says. It will then be audited by the external auditors as part of the 22-23 audit. But it is a live document, it is draft. We like you to have early sight of it, because it is important that this committee sees the whole governance process around which we operate. But it will eventually end up in the statement of accounts for 22-23. But it's good to see it as a separate document, and it helps validate what we're doing, and I think is shows all the controls and things that we're doing in great detail. So I think it's a useful report for you to see separately from the statement of accounts.
Thank you, Peter.
Yeah.
I just wondered if there's any written down, if anybody, I mean, I can understand what you're saying and what it is, but say behaving with integrity. If someone doesn't, is it recorded anywhere? Is there a log? You know, is there anything to support that this is working?
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, if people don't behave with integrity, we do have code of conduct for members and for officers, and we have conflict of interest logs as well. So that would flag where we're not acting with integrity.
And so where is that information recorded?
I'm hoping that in principle A, I think in principle A, it should be stated there that we have got a control around, let's see. Yes, so the first couple of bullets are behaving with integrity, code of conduct for council members, and the second bullet, staff codes of conduct, capability, disciplinary procedures, trainings provided. So here's all the examples within principle A of where we are acting with integrity.
Yeah, I shall probably think, but I can understand.
Sorry, John, can you use your microphone? Sorry.
Is there anything to prove that it is working? So many cases of this or so many cases of that? Or is it just yeah. Yeah, is there anything to show that it's working, basically?
Thanks, councillor. And I think the examples that David was talking about, because we have a complaints policy, we have registers of gifts and hospitality. So our 3Cs process, which is coming, I believe, to overview and scrutiny. So there's complaints, compliments, all those things are recorded under our 3Cs policy. So that's one part of it. There are various other bits and pieces. There's the, we record all legal advice provided. The monitoring officer has her own list of things that she needs to look at under code of conduct. So there are several ways. And I think what we've tried to demonstrate here is where those things are and how they can come in different guises. So, yeah.
Thank you, members. Any other comments or questions? No. There are no further speakers, therefore the recommendation is for the Audit and Risk Management Committee to consider and approve the contents of the annual governance statement for inclusion in the council's published statement of accounts for 22-23 in November. Please raise your hands if you agree to this recommendation. Thank you, members. Agenda item 10 is the internal audit plan for 23-24. I'll pass you back over to David to introduce the report.
Thank you, Chair. This is hopefully my final paper this afternoon. So this is the risk-based audit plan for the current year 23-24, which I have revised, and I advised the committee in July that I would be doing so following the progress report and the outturn report. So basically, I've had a look at what was agreed back in February, March, and so I've given an update based on what is more risky or risky to the council this year, and you will see within the plan itself that there have been some changes. So again, without track changes, the highlight of it is that there was initially an audit on budgetary control, but that actually got completed in March 23, so it was in the previous year anyway. There were no communities audits previously, but I've now added in some follow-up of the safeguarding and CCTV audits because they have still some outstanding issues from a couple of years ago. I've added in an audit of development planning, and that has been agreed with the head of planning, which replaces the audit of contract monitoring highways, which I've agreed with the head would not be a useful audit at this moment. Given the reduced resources that we've got currently, I asked the ARP partners if they could cover the audit of ARP enforcement, which we normally have conducted, and they've agreed. So that's good. That saves a few days for us, and I'll be working with the Suffolk Council on that one. There were 4 HR and payroll audits, but following agreement with Sam Anthony, I've replaced them. Now we've got audits of cyber security again, but this one is going to be a bit more technical and governance focused. The last one was a bit light, but as I mentioned in the governance actions, there's NCSC Cyber Essentials review going to be taking place in the next couple of months. So that's the technical side, and I'm going to look at the governance side to try and get a holistic report on that one. So Stephen Beecher and I have agreed that. Also, business continuity planning has been agreed with Stephen Beecher. That hasn't really been looked at, and we are concerned that the plans for each service may not be as robust as they could be. And finally, we're going to be looking at contracts register. I mean, there are some outstanding issues on procurement, and we understand the procurement rules are going to change soon. So we're not touching directly on procurement, but we do want to have a look at what contracts we've got out there and how robust those contracts are when they're planning, renewal planning and stuff like that. So those are the ones that are going to be replaced. So hence you can see in Appendix A of my report, that's the new and revised audits that we've got for total risk-based audits of 220 days. That includes ones that we've completed. So the ones that brought forward 22, 23, virtually, well, they're virtually all done. There's a couple that are just outstanding, and we've done a couple under environment, but the rest is sort of in progress and will be scheduled for the remainder of this quarter and then Q3 and Q4. And thankfully, we've also now got a resource, an additional resource to replace the full-time auditor. It's another contractor, sorry, but this person starts on the 9th of October and will deliver the 125 days that we need to complete this audit plan. So again, I thank management for that resource.
Thank you, David. Can I propose for the report, please? Councillor Christie, thank you. Seconder? Councillor Tierney, thank you. I now open the item for discussion. Please raise your hand if you have any comments. Councillor Christie?
Yes, probably just a quick one for Pete. Thank you, Chair. Peter, on page 251 of the key issues, it does talk about the vacancy for the internal auditor. And I know the wonderful work that David has been doing has been very, very thorough, and just wondered if that is continuing in terms of recruitment, what the plans are, and yeah, just to keep us on that very good route that we're on at the moment with audit.
Thank you, Councillor. I wouldn't say wonderful work. I mean, he's in the room, so let's not big that up too much. So he's doing an adequate job. Yeah, adequate, exactly. So yeah, and I've asked David to look at things with a slightly different lens, because our previous internal audit manager was here for a long time, and I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but sometimes a fresh approach and a fresh pair of eyes, you know, and looking at how you do things, which is why we're bringing some of these things in a different fashion, the AGS, the anti-fraud policy, because I think it's good to refresh and, you know, not to get used to things. So I haven't agreed, but I have spoken to David about extending David to the end of this financial year. And we've now got a full-time auditor starting on the 9th of October through the rest of this financial year. And during those 6 months, I'll be taking that opportunity to look at options for permanently resourcing the internal audit service. Because we have been out to advert once and we didn't get anybody. I'm talking to neighbours, we're talking to others about consortiums and things, but I need to give myself some breathing space to do that, whilst ensuring we can also deliver an audit plan which will satisfy this committee's requirements and the requirements to have an internal audit opinion for the year 23-24. So I think it's important that we do that. So we have tried, we're continuing to try, but we will extend the temporary arrangements, subject to David agreeing, to the end of this financial year to give me some options.
Thank you. Any further questions or? No further speakers, therefore the recommendation is for the Audit and Risk Management Committee to consider and note the revised internal audit plan 23-24. Please raise your hand if you agree to these recommendations. Thank you, members. Agenda item 11 is the Audit and Risk Management Committee work plan. It is as is in your pack. Has anyone got any comments on that? Okay. Yeah, sure.
I will just comment. Obviously, we'll put some things in November, but again, subject to agreeing things with external audit. I'm not quite sure where we'll be with the external audit plan for 22-23. We're concentrated on getting the 21-22 out the way, so there may be some fluidity in this depending on timing. But hopefully we can get up to speed and catch up as quickly as possible.
Peter. Thank you. The work plan is therefore noted for information. Agenda item 12. Items of topical interest. I believe you've got some, Peter.
It is very topical considering we've been talking about external audit today. And we're all aware of the issues, and this committee will also be aware of the PSAA route we took for procurement in the light of a very, very difficult market. So we have been allocated we've got the same auditors, although it will be under a new contract. The knock-on effect of all this backlog and everything has been, and I think I alerted this committee to this back end of last year, huge increase in audit fees. So base fees have gone, there's now 151% increase in our base audit fee based on procurement only. So that was for anyone to bid into the new market. Our fees have gone up 151%, and that's the baseline, and that's for everybody, because to attract people into the market, all the additional work that's been required, codes of audit conduct, regulations, it's all put enormous extra workloads on auditors. So until such time as they change our statement of accounts requirements, because again, that's another debate, because I think they're too complicated for a local government organisation, but we're all under the same IFRS regime, code of audit practice. Audit fees in the future will be hugely increased. Our baseline for 23-24 has gone up from 57,373 to 144,000. So our annual audit fee baseline, based on current standards, current regulations, is now 144,000. And that is the 151% procurement uplift, which every local authority across the country will have. So that's all I want to say.
Would anyone like to comment on that or have any questions about that? Okay, thank you. Agenda item 13. Items which the chairman has under item 3 deemed urgent, there are none. This marks the end of the meeting and I declare the meeting closed. Thank you, members.